NFT, crypto, all of this space. I am super stoked to be joined by my tuakana, Faiumu Matthew Salapu, a.k.a. Anonymouz. And if you don't know, you better go look him up because now you're going to know. Anyway, we're going to be chatting about a whole lot of things around the blockchain, but focusing more on the culture in the space. Right now, the bro is working on he's in a residency with Massey University down in Pōneke, and he's working on TATAU resampled, which is looking at the journey of receiving his pea, his TATAU, and then working up soundscapes and audio visual. I'll let him explain it. It's epic, and I'm super excited. What's really cool is he's bringing in these old technologies of TATAU and the culture that is associated with it, the tikanga that's associated with it, and he's bringing it in with blockchain NFT. So I'll let you talk about that, my bro. Hono e mihi kauana ki a koe tuakana. Nau mai hara mai ki tō tau whare kōrero. I'm excited to dive in. So, bro, do you want to just have a little bit of a background, who you are, where you grow up, your journey a bit?
Yeah, mo lava silvi inga mane whawhakai kako kamalangi mo ngai avangua kako ke mawhukai lunga ngai whamoe. What's up? It's a huge privilege to be here, brother. Knowing your work in the creative space and then seeing your innovation in the space and the way you're applying it. And it's an exciting time. And for somebody like me who's come up as I initially started off in music production and then moved into eventually video production and then integrated music and video production. It's just digital production and we're moving into a digital asset space. And so it's hugely exciting for myself just to kind of look at the strands of how these things work. Like I am a classically taught pianist. Like I grew up, my parents forced me to be the pianist for church, Māngere Samoan Methodist.
Shit.
And that was just to play for the choir. And they put me in classical piano lessons for that. But, once I at school discovered, and I was making cassette beat pause tapes at the time in my bedroom. And that was kind of how I got into making beats, was just that whole thing of having a tape deck, putting a tape in tape A, recording it, playing the drums in on my Casio keyboard and playing 2 minutes of drums and then looping it, play it in tape B and then play the bass line in tape A and then keep swapping that. That process is just something I've been addicted to ever since, and I'm still on that journey of figuring out how the technology works, with cassette tapes, and then discovered Logic
Bro, you're
Pro.
showing how old we are, eh?
Yeah, man. And then discovering Logic Pro audio software. Like the second I remember going to Auckland Grammar and walking to the music block, and they were like, here's a computer. You can just play something in MIDI and then hit record and press play. And it played it back to me. Like I knew straight away. I was like, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. Just kind of inputting data and then just being able to manipulate it, rearrange it into new compositions. And I'm still on that. So, it's gone from cassette tapes to computers, digital, mostly microphones and speaker equipment in the early stages. And that became an exploration in sound design and then video. And now we have this crazy thing, the blockchain and everything that affords. So, yeah, I'm really still at heart a teenage geek in my bedroom, just having a tutu with stuff and seeing how it all operates. And that's my fascination with the space. Is there's so many layers to it, but at heart, I'm just it's the technology that I'm really excited by and its ability to tell stories.
Yeah, bro, and we are, natural storytellers at heart, eh? I really want to grab onto that tutu aspect, bro, because, bro, that's how I learned how to do what I do, and even this interview, like sorting all this stuff out, I'm just having a tutu. But like, what's your experience of that, and like looking around your peer group, looking around your mates, and the things that we can learn and pump out while being a tutu?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything I've done has been like it's I guess like I currently stay next to the Moana, Te Pano Mataho, the Maunga in the background there, and then the Manuka Harbour, Te Waihua. And we moved here because we just realized, we knew that with a lot of the production we're doing and we're moving into an increasingly digital space, it was really important to kind of get an anchor, so forth, before we kind of keep venturing further into the digital. Moana, and so being next to the analog Moana here, like even the space I'm in at the moment is just a place for tutu. Like, I'm literally building like a metaverse studio where it's
Yeah.
integrated audio, visual production, and that comes from that whole notion of like when you do this thing, how does it connect to that thing? And if you film something that way and then you put it with this sound this way, and you just, because in the traditional industries kind of growing up, it was like people made music, like they made a music track in this part of the creative process, and then once it's done, then they hand it off to this side, and then they kind of like just make a visual interpretation of that thing. Or they had people making films, and then once the film was finished, then they would give it to this side to make the music for it. So they were kind of like stapling disciplines on top of each other. But I was always intrigued with, well, how do you weave that together from the outset? Like, why do we have to separate these processes? If somebody knows how a particular story sounds, feels, or should look and sound, then you could produce both at the same time and just explore that. So everything I've kind of built currently is kind of around the exploration of integrated audio and music and sound production, and increasingly haptic feedback because of the metaverse, like being able to
Tell us
feel
about
stuff.
that, bro. Tell us about that. That's something I've been watching and keen to have a try of, actually.
Yeah. It's I grew up in Miami, South Auckland, and I got addicted to hip hop through the subs. Like we used to roll through the hood, just like bumping, the earthquakes and the pioneers next to cars just to set off the alarm. Like that was the game.
That was the
See how
point,
loud.
eh? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I've always loved bass, and I got into production because I loved the way, not how only how it sounded in our headphones, but the way it felt when you're in the back seat, and the subs
Yeah.
just punching you in the chest. That same feeling we go to concerts for, that sense of scale. And so what haptic feedback is. So I was kind enough to have Wuja send this over. So it's like a sub vest. It's a vest that has subwoofers attached to like 5 of them around the body. And so in the same way, like bass in a cabinet in the car, the speaker cone itself is what's doing the vibration, but the box that it's in, the enclosure, is the resonance. That's what creates the bass. So with haptic feedback vests, your body becomes the box, your body becomes the
Okay.
resonance. Yeah, so like, we've all seen kind of like the metaverse aspects about like making the visuals, and Apple's come out with Dolby Atmos where you can have surround sound, and now to be able to actually feel the sound is just something that excites somebody like me. Like I say, I'm just a toto and like, oh, what does that do? And then I'm like yourself, like just diving into the space, even though you don't really know, but it just has something valuable to offer your creative storytelling intentions and so forth. So I'm like, man, how do I use Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro and haptic feedback pro whenever that comes out to create things so that we can amplify our stories that we want to tell. So
and it's kind of amplifying the whole experience, of the viewer, of the listener. That's something that we did with He Kaupapa Waka, our photographic, or it was a multimedia multi-sensory exhibition up at Waitangi. So we had my photos, we had Tiki Tane's soundscape, we had He Mieruere and Billy Harrison alongside Matua Hekenuku, my puhipi, carved the waka, and so you could see the photos in the waka, you could touch the waka, you could hear the soundscape, and you could smell the wood chip, the Cody wood chip. So it was like making it an immersive experience of the arts of the kaupapa of waka. And so that's something that I'm really excited for your kaupapa, is kind of diving into that. As a receiver of puhoro, I'm really keen to kind of, as much as I can, kind of experience the process with pea.
Yeah, which was an incredible work, by the way. Like, I was kind enough to have you kind of send that through. I know people experienced it, at where it was located, but like, even for us, like, it's not only as the creators of art, but to be able to consume the art with the intention and the wairua that you're wanting to get across. So when you sent me that file, it wasn't going to be a passive experience for me, like just something I'm listening to in the car, passively, or in the background. Like, we are artists that really put so much into the creation and the inspiration of it, and we like to think that those who consume our work also value the way in which they can consume it. And so, like, I remember here, everything was blacked out. I had the haptic feedback vest on, the Wuja vest, and I had the headphones, HD 600s, the Sennheisers. And then I listened to your work with Tiki, and it was freaking incredible. It was an amazing experience in an age where we can't go to cinemas and get that sense of scale. You're able to replicate that through these technologies and so forth. So that's probably one of the things that excites me so much, is the opportunity that it gives. A lot of the artists with depth. That's not to say that all artists don't, but there are obviously there's so many inspirational artists that we know who are top of their game, because the amount of just effort they put into the capturing of the sounds and the concepts you just described, and then they put all, at the end of the day, it just becomes this one digital file, this MP3 or WAV file, however Tiki rendered it out. And so all that care that went into creating it, I want to put that into consuming it, and that's what we intend for our audiences. So Big Mihi, that was awesome. That was an awesome kaupapa and awesome work. Astonishing.
Shout out to Tiki, man. That's still, even before the session, I went and lay on the floor in the lounge, chucked on the sound system, and I actually listened to it for that 42 minutes. It was wicked. And you actually need it. Like, interesting when you're talking about the bass, you actually, because of the way he's built out that sound, you actually need the bass to be able to kind of bring in those feelings. So he's done stuff like when they're doing haka, on each of the takahi, he's got this rolling sub, just boom, boom, and it means you can feel it. Or different parts. There's a waiata there, and he's done this massive, like, cinematic lift that just goes bam, like takes it up. Yeah, it's awesome, man, and it's on all the different frequencies, eh?
Oh, I mean, the sharks. We could do a deep dive on frequencies and the power of, essentially in an analog world where frequencies are the movement of particles, and whether it's light frequencies, they move in cycles, and whether it's light sound frequencies, they move in cycles. And as we know, especially in the indigenous circles, frequency and vibration and resonance, the ability for different frequencies to be on the same wavelength, is how we do a lot of our healthcare, and how we cure a lot of our ailments using sound and poroporo, titi, and different instruments to generate vibrations and so forth. And when you kind of look at the crypto space, and it's all cycles. It's the same thing when you kind of know how bear markets and bull markets work. It's cycles, and it's frequency, it's vibration. It's when people talk about the floor price and all these types of things, it's just an analog representation of what happens in digital, like life, all the atoms, protons, it's all vibration, frequency, and cycles. And so even where you're just talking about bass frequencies, like Tiki knows how to utilize bass to get a certain response.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
so, man, it's I'm just so fascinated. Like, the more we kind of get into this digital space, you realize that our analog ancestral indigenous space is quite aligned with it. It's a universal theme that goes throughout, that everything that, for every up, there's a down, for every down, there's an up. And that, and that's a metaphor for life. So,
And so tell us about the Anonymous 37 Hertz. What's the special number, bro? What's this magic number?
Oh, yeah, it's
put you on the spot.
So for those who don't know how frequencies are measured in terms of sound, we use hertz. So if you can imagine a rubber band, if you have a rubber band and you stretch it and you make it quite loose and you flick it, you'll be able to kind of see the waves in it, and it's a lower sound. And if you stretch it further and you flick it, it'll be a higher pitch, and you'll see more wavelengths. So one wavelength is what's called a hertz. So like a very low sound has very low wavelengths, wave cycles. And so all sound, every pitch has a different number, a different frequency. And so, for example, when you play A on the piano, that's a 440 hertz signal. And so, different sounds, like the higher up the pitch you have, the higher the frequency. So the first chord that I learned in piano is C major. Most people. So hopefully I can cut over to the piano here. So when you play C, E, and G, that middle note is what makes it a major. That's what makes it feel like a happy sound.
Happy, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's 659 vibrations. So 659 vibrations is this note.
Whoa.
And yet when you dip that and you play the next note down, which is the minor, so you're just playing the next note down,
Which
it
is
creates
the sad sound, the minors.
Yeah, the minor. So that's 622 vibrations. And so the C and the G are like the staples, they're the anchors, but it's the note in the middle in music. It's the middle note, it's the third. You're either got a major third or a minor third. And just by the ear moving 622 times, E flat, and then moving 659 times a second, E, just that difference of 37 frequencies is the difference that the air moving that less times makes us feel happy or sad. So we no longer think about music in an emotional sense, but it's actually a physical, scientific reality. That the air particles,
that's how the vibrations are affecting us.
it's all vibrations
as a person, or how we kind of relate with it.
Yeah,
it's massive, bro.
Yeah, even when people talk about sleep, like and different sleep like we have beta, alpha, theta, delta. Your body resonates at different frequencies. So the deeper the sleep you are, like you're moving into single digit frequencies, your body vibration. So you can go down to 7 hertz when you're sleeping in deep sleep, and the higher ones are like in the 10s and 20s, and so it's pretty insane once you kind of go down the rabbit hole of frequency.
It is a rabbit hole, it's like,
and vibration,
wow.
yeah.
But it also talks to how that vibration world kind of affects us, and how we affect when we're creating sounds and stuff. Same, that's the feelings that we get when we're singing, and when we're singing together. I think of like in the wharenui, when we're all standing up, ka waia tangata hi tātou. If we're all singing together, that creates that kind of energy that'll make us feel a certain way, powerful, bro. That's mean.
Yeah, and market cycles. Like I never used to understand what they talk about market cycles and all of that, but when you start to see how the cycles always come back. Like in life, the cycle never just goes one way. At some point, it will come back in. The market's not going to dip forever. It will rebound at some point, and it's not going to rise forever. It will dip at some point. And kind of, from macro cycles to micro cycles within the crypto pattern, candlestick charts and so forth, you start to see from music to indigeneity, vibration healing through the crypto markets. It's universal. It's cycles and frequency.
Cycle, frequency and vibrations, eh?
Yo.
So, bro, I really want to jump in to your kaupapa, tatau resampled. Can you give us like a synopsis and maybe the whakapapa of this kaupapa, bro? Because man, it's fascinating.
Cool, man. I guess to kind of really kind of understand the concept of it, like I work off a laptop. Like the majority of the production I do now is like I start off in music production, but it's sound production, it's video production. So at any given point, I'm in some project just using either audio software or video production software or combination to create things, which means I generate a lot of archives and a lot of libraries of very specific bespoke sound recordings from different places around the world and here in Aotearoa.
You must have the backups of doom, bro.
Oh man, we've had to get a server this year to just make sure it was all systemized and everything. But a fundamental concept that I now view my whole practice through is this idea of SYNT. And SYNT, for those who don't know, is just a fiber that was created by the old people over in the islands, and they would just take the outside of the coconut husk and they would rub it. They'd have conversations all day, all the oldies, and they'll rub it on their thigh, and then they would create these strands of rope made out of that raw resource. And the link to my production work and how RESAMPLE TATAU has come about is, SYNT back in the islands, that one raw resource of the coconuts, it supplies the architecture industry, binding all our architecture together. It supplies the navigation industry and tying all our waka together. It supplies the fishing industry. It supplies the textiles and our clothing and our ornaments, and I'm sure there's many, many more. So this idea of having one raw resource, SINIT, and being able to supply many industries, that's basically how I operate these days as a producer. And
Yeah.
all I'm doing is using microphones or video cameras to collate sound and then put them into production software. And now you're supplying the music industry, the radio industry, film TV industry, theater, live production, private sector marketing, all off a laptop, like just making beats and shooting film and just whatever combination of audio or visual signals that you're repackaging them. And, so I've got a bunch of work from hip hop songs on, Hollywood, Hobbs and Shaw soundtrack that was made on a plane, all the way through to theater shows or government COVID messaging videos and so forth. It's, like I say, I'm a bit of a tutu. I just like figuring out how many ways can I flip this. I think that's a hip hop thing too. Like how, when we kind of look at samples and how many ways can I chop this? I've always been looking at my archives and go, how many ways can I chop this footage or audio to supply whatever industry? So how this ties all into RESAMPLE TATAU is I documented my tatau, and it's too long of a story to go into here, but basically in 2015, I got my tatau done over 7 sessions, and I had a microphone there that was recording it the whole time. And I knew at some point I'm going to chop those samples up and create a work. And so many years later, a couple of years back, Massey University approached me for Toi Rāwhaurangi Pacific Arts residency to create a work. And at the same time, in a completely separate conversation, the Aotearoa NZ Festival of the Arts, Tawhiri, were like, would you like to premiere work? And so I was like, cool, we're going to hustle this up.
Synergy,
Yeah.
All came together.
Yeah. And so basically the idea came together. It's part of a longer series. So like I've always been fascinated. I've always loved music production, but kind of condensing it down to just 3.5-minute songs got a bit, I was just wondering too much from it. I've done the radio music thing for a while, specifically around hip hop from South Auckland and stuff like that. But I knew there was something deeper that didn't fit in there. And so I've been making a line of content of art called Resample, where I would just take a whole bunch of location recordings, the maunga, the wind, the water of a specific location, and then sample them and then rearrange them to the narrative of a local legend or a local story that resonates with that area that the sounds are being taken from. And so I've just been
that's
taking...
actually where we met, bro.
Yes,
it was with you were resampling with Urban Life at that
museum.
Auckland Museum gig. So I was working with a bunch of young fellas, with one of my bros, George Kingi, and his young fellas.
That's right.
Teaching them photography, and then you were working with the rangatahi
from Glen Innes,
GIs,
GI,
and so like just tell us about that story, bro, because going from a 3-minute built for radio cycles into a soundscape that kind of communicates a place, communicates a feeling, a vibe. Just tell us about that a little bit. Sorry for the digression.
No. It all
it's
lands.
The history of this piece,
it all connects. Absolutely, that's a beautiful memory, brother. I was in the mid 2010s, which is kind of like around when we were doing that project. Might have been 2012, but I was commissioned by Pacific Media Network, so Radio 531. And New FM to redo their jingles. And so I was like, okay, cool. But they weren't just pieces of music. They weren't just 5-second pieces of music. I realized this is like subliminal programming of our communities, because these are being pumped out as frequencies every 4 minutes. Like every 4 minutes, where every workplace, every lounge where our communities are, they're going to be hearing these sounds. And so I was like, do I really just want to be sitting in my studio making, programming through the latest patches from the Apple software developers or from Yamaha or what? How much deeper can I go with sound and vibration and so forth? So that's when I started to kind of all those jingles that have been playing on radio, Pacific Media Network radio, like our flagship stations for our people, like they've got so much codes embedded in them. Like I've just taken archival recordings, sounds that I've gathered around my trips around the Moana Pacific, and just taking very important places and then just weaving them, tucking them into the sound design. Not only just in radio jingles, but everything I work on. I've got, I guess that's the geek in me as well. Like it's just sliding in little frequencies into different projects, from gangster rap to orchestral collaborations to film soundtracks to radio jingles. It's just kind of knowing that it's not just digital frequencies that are generated off synthesizers coming out of Apple software engineering, but that it's like, like maybe it's the soundscape for the Dawn Raid apology that Jacinda sat under. Like that water playing underneath was from Te Waiōtaiki in Glen Innes, where Parihuia returned home. The door knocks that start the Dawn Raid apology in the Auckland Town Hall when Jacinda underwent the Whonga process, those door knocks were submitted from social media 24 hours before the apology, where I just asked online, everybody record knocking on your door and send them in, and then I'll just build them into the soundscape. So I'm fascinated with the ability to take sound and just pump it into wherever gets broadcast, because I understand the not just the aesthetic nature of sound, but a very powerful vibrational nature of frequency and vibration to be able to move things.
And you can do it like you said, with the Senate. You can do it on all sorts of, on radio, on TV, over the internet, in person. Got to congratulate you fellas for a bit of an award for that piece that you did with our sister Grace.
Oh yeah, that was epic.
Right, tell us about that, Ray.
Yeah, she's awesome. Like at the end of the day, I'm just a bedroom producer who just made 3.5 minute beats. Like, I just wanted to be like NWA. I just want to be like Dre.
Yeah.
And it's through organizations and other people from other disciplines. Like that's really what kind of got me on the worm, like down the rabbit hole on all these different things, because I wasn't just making 3.5 minute beats, which I still enjoy. But
and it's still one of your tonga and your kete, bro. But you got others. Yeah.
I started getting fascinated with, wow, how does sound work within poetry shows? Like, what's that? Like, how does sound work in film? And so you just kind of just start going down all these avenues. And she's always been, an innovator in her space and spoken word. And then, just the team they assembled for Upu, like, was just, it was gangster. It was, Nathaniel Lee's standing there kind of doing his thing.
He's
and just everybody, I can't go through all the names because I'll be doing a disservice, but these are like absolute OGs. And I never lose that feeling of like just sitting there going, wow, like I feel real blessed to be here with my Logic Pro and my microphones. I'm just gonna
with these legends, eh?
Yeah, and so they come with a frequency and vibration, and you see it like when they interact with each other, when they're reading a script. You can tell when they find that frequency and vibration where they're aligning, and it's no longer a performance, but they're literally
in the flow.
They're in the flow. And my job is really just to kind of figure out what frequency we're at and build. And I'm like, okay, this poem is about colonization. This is about something, and then I just go into the archives and I'm like, cool, I'm going to pull from that Kaupapa driven project there. I'm going to grab some water from there. I'm going to get some Simons from Erman's gangster rap album over here. I'm going to get this thing from over here. So that's kind of been like how I kind of operate these days. I guess I'm a bit of an archive artist. Like I just have a drives and servers full of stuff that I've accumulated over the past decade and a half. And every time I step into a new project, that's like, okay, what are we doing here? What do I need to pull up to serve on this Kaupapa driven mission? And then just pull them up and just start flipping.
No, wicked, bro, wicked. And so, all of that is the whakapapa of this project that you're working in now, eh? It was all of those experiences coming into your experience with your tatau. Tell us what it was like, and even deeper, it's that cultural process that we have around our taonga, like tāmoko, like tatau. You can't just go in and record anything, and you can't just go and produce anything with that stuff. You have to go through the proper processes, follow the tikanga, and so tell us about that, bro.
Yep. So I grew up really saturated by when's the movement stuff dropping in the hip hop scene. That's only what I was doing, and I was a real blender. I would just I'm a bit of a method producer. You know, like you have method actors, and so whatever the
Yep.
project was, I just kind of adopt it. But that became a bit of a tricky thing for me quite young because, like, I was quite living in quite schizophrenic environments. Like, I grew up in Māngere, South Auckland, so there was that version of me. And then I go to a Samoan, very conservative church, Samoan Methodist, you know, the good boy there, and I'd have that version of me. But I would bus out every day out into the city to Auckland Grammar, very Eurocentric Bailangi school, and I would be that version of me. And then I'd be drinking in the a.k.a. car park, like on Saturday nights, getting hammered, listening to Dr. Dre and Tupac, and that'll be a different version of me. And
Yes.
so, like, I knew like at that point in my career, like there was something missing, and I think we all intrinsically know it's got something to do with our parents and our ancestors, like that
Yeah.
connection. And I
That's our
hadn't
whakapapa.
absolutely, and I hadn't really, you know, my dad had the tatau, but to me it was just an aesthetic thing. Like it was no different to the ice cream on his arm, and so forth. But what how this whole thing got triggered is ironically the radio jingles for radio station. I went along to a recording to record the sound of the tatau that a mate was getting, and he was getting it from a tufunga. Tulawena Tuifatsina, who I must acknowledge, you know, salute to him. He's recently passed away. I just found out
Ura.
today. But he basically offered me the challenge. Like I went in just to get the tatau sounds purely for artistic reasons. Um, that's the disclaimer because I know most people have some real deep rooted association. Like my father had the tatau, the traditional tatau, or you know, my parents wanted me to have it. I was just wanting to get it for the art. But after he had, after I was about to leave with the recordings, he was like, "Please sit down. Like, why are you getting it done? So why are you recording these taps?" And I
Yeah.
said, ironically, they were listening to 531 in the, you know, at that time. And I was like, "See that radio station there? That's going to be your tapping's going to be the hi hat for these jingles I'm doing."
Yeah.
And it's what he said next that led me on this whole path that I'm on now. Like he goes, "Okay, to you it's just the sound, to us it's a feeling."
Yeah.
For us to, you know, like we know that your art industry, the fine arts, will hear it and you'll get props and whatever this innovation thing you're doing, but it'll be just a sound to you. If you really want to understand this, you need to know the feeling. You need to have it yourself. um, and so I left,
Far out.
yeah, and I left there instinctively. I just walked home, walked into the
Wow.
lounge, and I told my wife I'm getting it done. And
And that was the
ironic,
moment, eh?
that
No.
was the moment. And then
Yeah.
before you know it,
Mohiupu, yeah.
I just been on this massive, you know, I ended up learning a lot about the culture through an association with the program Angu Fat Samoa 101, which was an education program based here in Aotearoa. It started with 14 students, and then I joined it to do research and learn about these indigenous customs of Fat Samoa that are slowly being lost within the diaspora. And then I created some content for it, some videos, some audio, and then that led to an invite from Melbourne diaspora with some students there, and then Perth, Sydney, Brisbane, Seattle, Hawaii. And so between 2014 2018, I was just on this crazy journey running around the world in the Pacific with a camera and microphones, just creating content around our culture, learning about it, and so forth. And then, ironically, reconnecting with family and culture and being very proud and taking on a Matai title, which
Yeah.
is ironic because anonymous means having no name. And then at some point within the growth, my dad was like,
You were named.
"We want to
Yeah.
give you a name, and we want to give you our family name, Faiumu." So
Yeah.
that
Beautiful.
came full circle, and basically going through the tatau journey, like that ties back into like this whole exploration of crypto and NFTs and stuff. Because the fundamental of tatau is like when you sit down, like they go, "Are you serious about embarking on this process?" And I'm like, "Yep." And they're like, "Okay, lafo ai maelo kingo, like give me your body and don't
Yeah.
fight the pain. Like tali le au, lean into the pain. The more you try to fight the pain or tense up or strain or be a tough dude, the ink will not hold. You're going to make this process a lot more difficult than it needs to be, and you may not survive the journey." And so that notion of leaning into the pain, um, for myself, like, was a really weird one because as you're lying there, you have to teach yourself like the more it hurts, the more you actually relax into it, which
Yeah,
is
to breathe into it, eh?
which
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
really weird thing to do. So different parts hurt more than others, but you train yourself that the more the pain hurts, the more you actually relax into it and go, I welcome it. I tali the au, I accept it.
Yeah.
And no better place to see that than in our crypto NFT journeys, in our investments and
Yeah.
so forth. Like, it's easier to buy when, everything's going up, but we know that when it's crashing and dipping, when we all freak out, like, that's where the true value is. Like, that's where
Yeah.
you want to buy, because you're buying at a discount. I
Yeah.
mean, imagine the pain of that Bitcoin crash we just had,
Yeah.
like that one there.
Yeah, it's making some of us a little bit
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but
Shout
if
out to
we
all the
are
crypto
leaning
fans up
into
in
the
there.
pain, leaning into the pain and trusting the process, eh?
Absolutely.
Those
And so
fundamentals.
that's a philosophical framework that I learned from TATAU that's, also very applicable in crypto. And this whole space is this notion of, when things hurt, embrace it more.
Yeah.
And because when it rebounds, you've just doubled your money, or you make way more growth after you've invested at the bottom or at the most painful.
Yeah.
And that's true in crypto, and it's true in TATAU. There's a metaphor there in that with TATAU, you go into it with your old skin, and
Yeah.
then you emerge from it, like, after being battered and bruised and just absolutely going through all the turmoil of all the pain. And at each point in the pain process, you're embracing it. It's the same thing with crypto, and so I'm just grateful for, like, just kind of, like I say, being a tutu in the space, and then kind of finding out where all the alignments are and so forth. So I've been really fortunate on this Resample TATAU project to kind of indulge in the aesthetics of technical production and hip hop and orchestration. So essentially what the work will end up being is, I got it done over 7 sessions. It's going to be a 7-session movement work that has TATAU tapping provide the basis of it. And then on top of that, there's music production,
Yeah.
indigenous live instrument performances, a log drum performance, and then some orchestra coloring it all in and adding all the dynamics of these crazy emotional journeys that we undertake, whether it's a TATAU crazy dynamic journey or a crypto NFT dynamic crazy journey. So yeah.
So, bro, like, how are you working this into the blockchain NFT world? Because that's what interests me. So we can see these kind of connections between tatau, tamoko, the crypto, the leaning into the pain. Some of us have to learn it with like emotional pain, things like that, like leaning into that and processing that. So how are you kind of weaving those massive those massive threads into this NFT blockchain space?
Yeah, cool. Okay, where do I start?
Yeah, where do you start, bro?
It's like with one of the fundamentals that I love about blockchain is this idea of provenance, of history, of proven, immutable, undeniable history, like being able to encode that within the smart contracts, to be able to trace where something comes from, in an
Yeah.
age of, like, right click save and, all the fakery out there, the ability for something to be designated as an original. The very start of TATAU is like mired in controversy, because just like any indigenous culture, like within the space of TATAU, some people say Tangaloalangi, the god, handed down the initial tools to the Siamese twins from Fitiuta. Some people say that's from Fiji. Some people say it's
Fiji, yeah.
from Manono Islands in Samoa, Fitiuta. And so you've got all these different versions. And the truth is, we can never know what the true version of our legends are.
Yeah.
It's
And it's just
fascinating.
like kōrero Māori as well,
Yeah,
according to this iwi, according to this iwi, and it's not about disproving another, or like there is only one truth, but actually like looking into it. So what does the story mean for you guys? What does
yeah,
the story mean for us? And what are the things that we can learn from that, eh?
yeah. And the amazing thing is, like, with this reset that we're going through with the blockchain, you are able to be at the start of the legends. You're creating the first block.
Far out. Yeah.
You're resetting the first block. And so that's a fascinating concept, that even though in an analog sense we can debate all we want about the versions of our myths and legends, but we weren't there. There was no smart contract when God handed down the tools. But as we progress our story, because culture and storytelling and myths are an evolving thing in our stories, the ability to tell it through blockchain, you get to actually define in the first block of whatever blockchain you're doing, immutable, undeletable, permanent record of this is what happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and so there's an interesting, intersection there with Tatau. The
Yeah.
other thing about it is like this notion of versions, like not only is about what happened, but like the people have different versions of what happened in the story. And when
Yeah.
you look at NFTs, it's like there's different versions of the character,
Yeah. Different
um,
iterations, eh?
different iterations of the legend, different iterations of whichever crypto punk or trillionaire thug you got. Oh,
Yeah.
but they're all carved from the same story.
Yeah.
And so, that's another part that really fascinates me. One of the other parts that really fascinates me is this notion of archiving.
Mm.
Um, in the Tatau story, one in Tatau in general, one of the great things that I was real privileged to do in my journeys with the Angu Samoa 101 movement, they had an informal partnership with the Ainga Su'a Suluape clan, who are the
Yeah.
grandmasters of the practice, who kept it
Yeah. The
alive.
Torunga,
And
eh? Yeah.
yeah, and the like the Toiina Aleva'a. And so like being in close proximity to him and hearing his, I guess, philosophies around it, he was always grateful to our indigenous practices of tatau, tāmoku, and all these things, because our ancestors realized that skin was an amazing what do you call it, canvas to be able
Yeah.
to document our histories, because some civilizations had written it in scrolls which eventually got burnt or lost to these elements. Some got put in wood or carved in stone in caves, which eroded. And so a lot of the archiving of history and stories have been lost over time. But when you take those stories and symbols and you embed it on your skin, then it's transmitted from father to son, master
Yeah.
to apprentice,
Generational. Yeah. Yeah.
generational. And so you look at that way of transmitting information, of archiving stories and passing it down. And we are moving into this metaverse and digital era where it's being transmitted in hard drives, zeros and ones, binary code.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do we, we need to kind of have this conversation about the preservation of our culture and stories and histories within the ones and zeros, because it's the opposite of our analog format. And so that notion of archiving and the transmission across time and space of our stories, we are doing that currently with digital, NFTs, all these Web 3.0 applications. But how, like, what are we doing to make sure that all of these stories in analog form, our tataus, are also present in the next evolution of our journey? And so,
Yeah, and
it's
it's kind of like, and this is a really key thing that I feel like we really need to look at, is that yep, we put our time and energy into developing the metaverse stuff, the NFT stuff, but we also have to really be present in our real world.
yeah,
Like in our receiving the tamoko, the tatau, in the kind of carrying out of our tikanga, of our cultural practices, and that's something, bro. When you and I had a yarn a little while ago, this was one of the things that was just like a mic drop moment for me. It was something that really stood out. You remember what it was?
yeah,
Yeah, can you tell me?
yeah. I mean, you know, like we look at our. I mean, we're already kind of walking avatars to a certain degree, where like so much of our time is spent within these, the platforms of the phones in our hands and so forth. But at least we kind of have an awareness of the analog world before us, um, and we are mindful of when we go into it, and we know that we are present in real life, but we are just going through this thing. Obviously, a lot of us more addicted than others, and we can get out.
Yeah,
But for our young ones who are digital natives, who are picking up the technology sooner than most, and where their brains are forming, and my wife and I, we work in a lot of spaces, but we choose to prioritize a lot of our creative production in spaces that are quite frontline for communities, like that, fundamentally they're quite critical to make sure that we are applying, digital best practice and consumption in that space. And when you listen to the experts talk about what technologies at the moment do to to young brains.
Yeah.
And when you see the amount of our Pacific, and Maori communities that use phones as babysitters, and so forth, the when the metaverse it's already here,
Yeah.
but when you have the ability to be able to be any avatar you want and to customize yourself however you want, and your brain's still forming. And, at least for us, we get to choose our PFP and all these types of things. But
Yeah.
for our young ones, our kids whose brains are malleable and they haven't formed yet, once they get into these metaverse aspects where they can customize their existence and optimize it, all of a sudden that's going to be much, much more appealing than real life. Because I know, for a lot of us, like, we are mocked because we feel plastic, and when our accent's not right, it's not pronounced correctly in church, or I don't like the way I look, I get mocked, I'm too fat, I'm too whatever. And so the customization within the metaverse, where you can become whoever you want to be, you can be whatever dinosaur, whatever, whatever thing.
Ape or
Absolutely.
or punk or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Then that's a really serious, like, there's serious implications of that, for for us, because as people of the village, like, we know that, whatever success we have, I know I can only speak from being the Samoan thing, it's like, when you catch fish, it's not just yours. You distribute it amongst the village first,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
are a member of a village. You were born into a family. You were born into this village. This is your identity.
Yeah.
Whereas on the metaverse and online, you customize your identity. I'm gonna be part dinosaur, part this thing, part this thing, part this thing, and you create your own identity within whatever ecosystem or village you want. And it's the Wild West at the moment. Like, it's
Yeah.
like all things, and this is not a moral argument, but in technology, it's music and porn that leads, and
Far out.
they are the best at exploring the possibilities. Culture and all that stuff, they're late to the party. I've been in some institutional corridor with our agencies who are doing all these reviews about preserving language and all these things. They have no idea. They have no idea about what these things can do, and there's no
Yeah. Yeah.
strategies in place. And so, who's going to get to dictate the parameters and the engagement in which our young ones step into the space? It's going to be the gaming companies, it's going to be the music industry, it's going to be the porn industry, it's going to be all these things. And culture, identity, family values are going to be back there. So, that's a part of the reason why. It's the counterbalance. It's not a moral argument. It's just making sure that we who are the our generation, everybody that's on the stream obviously knows about the space. We all have a collective responsibility to not just lean into the the speculative money making side of things and the storytelling aspects of it, but we actually have a fundamental responsibility to be shaping the space up now, so that our young ones, who inevitably will be wandering into these spaces where they will be customizing their NFT avatar within the ecosystems they work into, that they have an analog anchor in which they are able to kind of move about and navigate the space.
Yeah, and that's such a massive thing. Like, I even remember, like, in my short lifetime, even so, when we were growing up, everyone wants to be an American. Like, because that's what we see on our TV. That's what we're listening to in our music. Those are the clothes that are cool at the time. So you see everyone wearing those clothes, listening to that music, talking in that way, saying those words, those sorts of things. And then, like, coming into now, I have seen a total shift as a photographer. I'm at hui after hui after hui after hui, different events, different things. And so I've seen a big shift from everyone wearing Nike and Adidas and whatever to wearing Tuco Legacy, wearing Hine, wearing, like, our own, like, starting to reclaim our own sort of brand or our own visual identity. And that's something that when you said that, bro, it just was like a bomb drop for me, because I was like, that really affirmed. And even the youth development stuff that I was doing, before diving full on into photography, our whole thing was, it's awesome to be Māori. You don't need to be anyone else. You be Māori, and Māori is awesome. Our tupuna were amazing. Our superheroes, Maui, like, massive superhero. We don't have to be Iron Man. We don't have to be Batman. We could be Maui, and that's even better because he's ours, and we belong to him. That sort of thing. So. going into the metaverse space, like you said, bro, our kids are going to be in there, and they're going to be more fluent in that language than we ever will, but if we don't kind of set some cultural foundation, if we don't set some tuapapa for them to kind of grab onto, so when they go into the metaverse, if they chuck on their goggles or whatever and they're in there, and then they don't see anything that looks like them, they don't see anyone that looks like them, they don't see anyone that sounds like them, then of course they're going to grab onto, I want to be an ape, or I want to be a dinosaur, I want to be a something else. But what I'm really excited about is, like working with, people like us, people like our mates, to really make an imprint in that space, so that, when they go in there, they can be, a Māori, they can be a Samoan, they can be a Tongan, they can be whatever they are, but in that space. So we're taking our ahurea, our culture, into that space. And that's something for them to hold on to, because it's not only how we look, it's not only our avatar, it's not only, what profile picture we have, it's also the values that we, live by. It's those sorts of values, like, te kotahitanga, like that communal way of thinking is quite distinct from a lot of European cultures now. Used to be the same, but now where it's kind of individualistic, it's me, my, I, for us growing up, it's we. And so, something that's good for me is good for all of us. And that's kind of like, that's what I'm wanting to, really create with this blockchain navigators thing, is that, working with you, with Chelsea, with Richie, with all of the other people in the space, if we all work together, then we can all rise together. And that's kind of the thing. That's what I want our rangatahi, our tautamariki, to be able to grab onto when they go into that space. They can, when they chuck on their goggles, they look around and they go, those are all our tuakana, and man, it's mean to be them. I want to be me, which is being like them. So that's a real important thing for us to, set. And like you said, as early adopters, going into that space, there's a big, big space to fill, bro.
Yeah, and that notion, exactly what you just said, early adopters. Like, this is where we flourish. Like, us as people of the Moana, as navigators of the Moana. Remember, while the world was doing America's Cup style racing, yachting, like they'll do their flash technology of how they navigate the waters, but they will always do it within sight of the shoreline and safely and so forth. Going beyond the horizon is a scary thing, into the unknown, the metaphorical unknown and literal unknown. To sail, Moana, what's beyond there? I don't know, and it's scary, but I'm going to go look. And the metaverse and blockchain is the scary unknown. I mean, let alone world dynamics that's happening at the moment, unprecedented times with everything that's happening. There's two, there's up energy and there's down energy. And as people of the Moana, we shouldn't kind of worry about the dystopian aspect of what things could be like, but we need to be brave and go, I have no idea what this blockchain thing is, and what all this Web 3.0, and it's scary and it's the unknown. But we've done this before. Like, we are the best at this, at navigating the unknown. And the other part that ties into that is we were able to navigate the unknown because we knew how to read our the stories that had been inherited, and use the stars and all these types of things to navigate the waves. Those waves are now algorithms. So we need to take the accumulated knowledge that have been passed on to us, and we are now kaitiaki of all this indigenous cultural knowledge to be able to navigate life. Frameworks like TATAU, embed them within the frameworks of the blockchains and the Web 3.0 applications that we build, so that when our rangatahi come through and they're navigating not physical waves, but the algorithmic waves, they have a wave, an algorithm that we are setting up for them to plug into to be able to ride safely. Because if we don't program the algorithm from that accumulated data we've been handed, as from our ancestors, then they're going to be writing different algorithms. And in a world where algorithms at the moment are very echo chambers and very, very dangerous algorithms. We know how powerful algorithms are. Those are the new waves that we are sailing in a digital Moana. And so, absolutely,
just drop that mic, bro. Drop that mic. Nah, but like that, and that's how i roto i te ao Māori, he huatau, he kurahuna. In the Māori world, we're talking about metaphors. We're talking about like hidden meanings. And we're also talking about, when you talk about a metaphor, it's like something that's in one space actually can link to another. And like when you're talking about tatau and the crypto, market cycles, those sorts of things, that navigational knowledge and those values and tikanga that our tupuna had, allowing them to navigate a new space, allowing them to pull up different islands, those sorts of things. That is, that's why I've called it blockchain navigators. It's this big moana, and the possibilities are endless. But how do we, take our people together, into this new space? So it's massive, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I guess, where a lot of my current work is in that, I guess, philosophical kind of framework. I'm trying to get a really good understanding of I guess, taking a lot of our cultural fundamentals that have been passed on to us, and in my, especially in my work over the past decade in this cultural space, navigating the diaspora, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Seattle, Hawaii, where all our Samoan diaspora are, and seeing how that, like, what are the things that they are trying to preserve in their family legacies that they're trying to learn about the culture. For me, it's about taking all that data about what our diaspora generation that are trying to create something better for our kids, and then take all the production aspect of what I'm doing in the studio capabilities of building a metaverse studio, so that I can create content and products and NFTs that serve that purpose. Because, for example, like I had this thought the other day, like in Samoan culture, one of the ways we gift is through a fine mat. And the fine mat, like different mats are valued differently to other ones. They have intrinsic value according to what according to what events it had passed through. So this one might not appear to be much, but it was used at this royal wedding, and then it came through this tangi and from this person. And so, like, when you hear the orators talk about, like, in the big events, they say, okay, we are gifting you this fine mat because we received this from this person at this event, and it came through this wedding, and then this high chiefs. And so they have provenance. And what is blockchain?
That's the NFT, bro.
It's provenance. It's NFTs. Our fine mats are NFTs. They are analog NFTs. And once you kind of
but we keep it alive, eh? So it's
Absolutely.
the kaikorero, it's the orator that actually, ka taki te whakapapa. They're the ones who recite the whakapapa, the genealogy of this mat, that it was woven by this person, who have their own mana, and then it was gifted to this person at this event, da 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 da. So, like, man, when you're explaining it, I can see it happening with an NFT. I make an NFT, sell it to someone, and then they sell it to someone, and that's kind of like the history.
It inherits,
Pro.
It's accumulated. It accumulates, wairua, and like when you sit in at a good, at a Samoan function, and you have great orators who will break it down. Like, it just looks like a fine mat, but they're like, this is the provenance of this mat, like, and then for me now, I'm like, man, this is what NFTs are. And that's what I'm really trying to encourage a lot of people in this space about, is to not just, like, whatever your reasons for getting into this game, if it's to make money or make art, all these types of things, but we have a responsibility for cultural preservation for our people and all those types of things, because these analog practices will not be able to compete in terms of influencing our young ones in the digital form. Yes, it will always, hopefully always exist in analog form, but like even with Sinet, like Sinet itself that I talked about before is a dying art. Like, the oldies are losing the ability to be able to do that, and that's analog form. We haven't even talked about,
and the young ones aren't picking up
interested.
The practice,
Exactly, because
they're
they're not
sitting
seeing
around
it.
having those conversations.
They're not walking into the metaverse and seeing people rolling up Sinet. So good luck preserving that aspect of our, and so a lot of my work in the space, I'm trying, there's so many areas that I want to tutu in, but there's a part of me that's always kind of allocating a lot of our project time and resource allocation towards projects or kaupapa that, create a bit of a framework that kind of helps the whole scene preserve our histories.
Yeah, and that's massive, bro. And so with like this Kaupapa resample tatau, you're going to be launching it at the New Zealand Festival. I see you're rocking their t-shirt, the New Zealand Festival. So you're going to be premiering it premiering it there. But
Yep.
like, what's the experience? So I walk into, where are you doing it, at the stadium?
TSB Arena, yeah.
TSB Arena.
Which
So I
is
walk into the TSB Arena, which is massive, bro. Congrats.
shout out.
So what's the experience like? Like, talk us through what your vision is.
Cool. So this is where the work will also exist as an NFT. So this is the really exciting part of it all.
Can I buy one? Can I like get in on that action, bro?
Yo, absolutely. Like you know, and I'm really just wanting to kind of showcase it, like leverage the project. Like, I mean, the ability to develop this work through Massey University, it's College of Creative Arts. If you don't know, like, their studio is insane.
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful way in the country. Yeah,
I was probably, I just done a session there. I'm going back to record all the string arrangements in a few weeks, and so it second to none. They're world class facilities. It's amazing to develop it there and then be able to premiere it in an arena. Like I'm making content for an arena. So that's the end part of it. But essentially, how this will work is it's going to exist in multiple formats. So, one of the things I realize with a lot of these festivals, they can be real bougie. Like when you say, New Zealand Festival of the Arts, quite often you go along to these festivals and it's like, well, what's fine art? And quite often it's Eurocentric or it's very, upper classy, bougie or whatever.
Yeah.
And, the hood often in these spaces don't feel like they belong or, and so what this work will be is all the audio samples and the creation of it. There will be a version of it that sits in Web 2.0. So I will be making once I've collated all the video or the audio and all the composition. Like when we go to the mixing stage, where we finalize the files, we will be actually finalizing various versions for different delivery. So we are going to customize and make a version that will be for Spotify, for YouTube, and it'll be a very specific arrangement. And so that's accessible to everybody, because that's one of the core things for me, is making things that people can access. I mean, you don't have to be bougie or rich NFT collector to be able to access. So there will be a version of this work that will be free. That will be on the Spotifys, the YouTubes, the Web 2.0 current streaming systems. Then there will be another arrangement that has extra layers of stuff in it, like extra log drum work, extra music, extra like just little variations of things, and that'll be in the arrangements that exist as NFTs. So these are collector's items. So in the same way people can collect a print, a high-end artist and so forth, like there will be versions that will be made available to people to basically own that version of RESAMPLE TATAU that's different to the versions on traditional streaming platforms.
Just put my name on one of those, bro.
My man.
Yeah.
And then there will be an ultimate version, which is an NFT as well. And this is that utility value that we keep talking about giving you access to certain things. And that those utility versions, the NFTs, will give you access to wherever it's performed live. Like, for example, at this arena, because the star of the show for it will be this analog log drum. So one of the kaupapa this project's built around is, I've talked about the digital archiving. So that's where we use microphones and cameras to capture audio signal or video signal, and then we can play that back, and that's an archive of that moment. There's this thing that happens in classical circles in my time in that space. Like, there's a belief in that space that when you create a new violin, before you play it, what they do is they'll place it in front of speakers, and then they will play classic music through it, to it, so that the violin inherits the frequencies and vibrations of that classical music that it aspires to. Same thing with guitarists. When they quite often when they make new guitars, before they play it, they'll play it in front of speakers, and they'll play the frequencies of classic whatever genre guitar music through it. And so I did the same thing when I got to TATAU. Not only were there digital archives taking place, the microphones capturing it, but I actually had this log drum, which I've never played, from Samoa. It was sitting next to me the whole time, inheriting the sounds. So this was there. And
Whakatoi te Māori, eh? Like that's a way that we talk about, some of our taonga, when we take them to different places, ka whakatoi te Māori o taua wahi, you imbue the the
Oh,
energy,
beautiful.
the essence of whatever that event was of the karakia. When you karakia, something, you're imbuing an essence into it. And so, yeah, bro, like I'm just totally hearing it. That's what you did with your
Yeah.
drum, eh?
And so when you're at these events, it's basically an art installation because you're hearing the digital capture of the moment, the
Yeah,
digital archive, and live is being played the analog archive. Like it was there.
yeah,
Like in the same way we talk about the legends of Tatau, like was
yeah,
anybody
bro.
there when the initial tools were handed down? No,
Yeah,
we weren't at that. But in terms of my story, like this log drum was there. I'll die, but this log drum will still be around,
yeah.
and the digital
Your
file will
mokopuna
still
can
be
have that.
around.
Yeah,
Absolutely, and so that will be the utility value. One of the utility values of the NFT of Resample Tatau is the ability to access performances in which practitioners will be playing this one that was there during,
yeah.
and you've got
A
this really,
particular one too, eh?
yeah, and you've got this really interesting overlap of time and space because you've got a digital archive, like the samples that were recorded playing at the same time that the analog archive is playing. And so
Yeah,
you're overlapping time and space on top of itself in this art performance. And so that's, I guess, one of the utility values that the NFT version of Resample Tatau will give access to. So I'm trying to make sure that there's different, different tiers of the work that will eventuate that, whether you're just consuming that specific sparser version on music industry version online on YouTube or Spotify, you can
yeah,
consume it there. If you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, then you might want to consider getting a limited NFT version, which is different. Like probably drawing from even deeper archives. Like there's certain really almost ritualistic aspects about the Tatau process, and I've captured a lot of quite insane recordings and samples from around the world that I will tuck into those limited edition ones and probably have certification about what those differences are for that version for the collectors to hold.
yeah,
And then there'll be these, I guess, ultimate ones, which will be the NFT versions with more, I guess, intrinsic layers built into them, as well as given access towards performances that have the log drum, and probably in the future, like interactive stuff around haptic, because that was one of the cool things about the technology. Like these guys sent it to me, and they're like, however it works for you as a creator, as an innovator in this space, we can customize the technology for yourself. And so like I'm like looking at like ways to kind of build the tech so that it's not necessarily like a vest, but it sits in your tatau area around
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
thighs and your midsection, and the content you're watching about this project is interacting with the subs on your body, and maybe some electrocutions or stuff to kind of make you feel pain in those regions. So
Yeah, so tap, 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 and then you get the pain signals, eh?
yeah,
On your
man.
legs or whatever. Far out.
Yeah, so it's all to just having a good, just seeing what the technology can do, and we have to remember, like one of the fundamentals for me is like art, especially music, is a reflection of the technology of the time.
Yeah,
Like from the caveman days, if all you had was rocks and wood, then that's how the music sounded. We know that music sounded in the 70s, or the analog Motown, because that was the technology, it was analog tape. And then the
mm,
synthesizers of the 80s, like that technology came along, and then music went this way. And
yeah,
what do you know, the 90s, they discovered sampling, and so
yeah,
music and things went that way. And so every time technology changes, the art change, like the art kind of moves in a different space.
yeah. It
And this is
evolves,
no
eh?
different, it evolves. And so NFTs, blockchain applications is just the next iteration of that technological shift that will inform the arts. And that's why I am in this crazy bat cave trying to create an optimized space to create for the next shift in where the art is heading.
Yeah. And so, bro, when we're talking about, setting a cultural foundation, what are the things that you think are important for us when we're thinking about, if we're gonna make an NFT collection and drop an NFT collection, when we're thinking about going into crypto, when we're thinking about metaverse gaming and those sorts of things, like no doubt some of our people will be able to create metaverse games, or like those sorts of things. What are some important kind of cultural things that you think we really need in that space, to keep our people safe, but also to keep our people being ourselves?
Yeah, that's a That's a complex question, and it's one I've struggled with for a long time. Uh, I I've recently been given a title by my therapist. So I've been in therapy for a while to kind of do a lot of self healing and a lot of self fixing. And ironically, something that she said to me in that space really applies in this space, and that's this notion of the creator versus the created. So
Ah,
what
yep.
I mean by that, and hopefully this might catch something or somebody out there can make sense of it, because it's just might be loose ramblings, but I personally, just to take a step back, have always struggled with that notion, as I now understand, of the creator versus the created. So I grew up in very, conservative, traditional Pacific circles that say that you are not enough. Like you need God in your life because you are insufficient. You don't, by yourself you are not enough. You need something greater than yourself to complete you, to be who you are.
Mm,
And I understand that notion, but at the same time we get this other opposite programming that says you are enough as you are.
yep.
Like you are everything you need to be. You don't need the world to tell you that, you know, that you need something else. Like you're fine as you are. And so, like, I've always struggled with, well, which is it? Like trying to navigate the rights of the, I guess, the individual
Yeah.
versus the rights of the collective. And that's where all of this kind of comes into play. This whole notion of the individual versus the collective. And when you look at the way these collections are, especially in the NFT space, like you've got people that are releasing a one-off. That's the intrinsic value for this art piece, is that there's just one. And then you've got these other ones, like it's the community, it's the whole thing. We are all accountable to each other. We're all going to huddle, and the floor's going to rise. And so that's the conversation to me. I know culturally, from my own perspective, that we need to kind of identify as a community for our young ones, clarifying where religion starts and ends or gets blurred, and culture starts and ends and gets blurred. And if we can kind of just get a general consensus about what is the ideal platform, ideal, I guess, kind of foundation to kind of work from, then that makes it quite easy for us to kind of give a framework for how we look at collections of NFTs, or anything that steps into the space where it's about culture and societal integration and so forth. Because obviously, with the metaverse, anything can be anything. Like everything's possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is like, if everything's possible, like where does culture sit in that? Like there are no cultural protocols. Like
Mm,
I remember being in an art project where the other ceremony, the traditional other ceremony, is like the chief's daughter sits here, the taupo, the maiden, and then alongside her are the taule'elea and the high chiefs over there, and the orator chiefs over here. And that's how it's been done for thousands of years. Yet in this art show, like the director was like, "Oh no, I'm just going to change it because I can. This is the arts." And it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's like, and that's just a theater show,
Yeah.
and like the oldies, the art, like our elders in the room were like, you can't mess with protocol. This is
Yeah.
how the arrangement is in an analog setting. She sits there, orators over there, high chiefs over there. I don't care what you do as an artist. That's
Yeah.
not going to fly. And
And
that's
I think it's about digging into the why of these things. Like
yeah,
there's so many tikanga in Te Ao Māori that people don't understand. Oh well, like the one that you hear people complain about is, oh, why do men sit at the front and then women at the back? Is it because men are more
yeah,
important? No, it's not. It's actually because we're looking after our wahine. And once you know the why,
beautiful.
then you go, oh, actually, no, that makes sense. So if you know
That's it.
why the rangatira sits over there, you know why the puhi sits over there, you know why the kaikororo over there, like there'll be a whakapapa to those things. There'll be
Beautiful.
a reason to those things, and once you know the reasons, then you can really embody them. You can really hold on to that.
So you've helped me answer it. Like that's what we need to be doing. Like right now is kind of identifying to our communities who are moving into these spaces why the culture is the way it is. It's never going to be perfect. Just like the market's never going to be perfect. It's going
Yeah.
to be ups and downs. but generally as humans, we strive for progress over time. Yes, we can be terrible to each other, but we have survived this long, and so the markets will always go up and to the right. It's never going to be perfect, but this is why it is the way it is. And I think that's the kōrero that needs to be shared as everyone's FOMOing into trillionaire thugs and all these other things, which is great at a speculative level and investment level if it's fundamentals. But even more important than any of that is a fundamental understanding about our culture, about our cultural indigenous practices and frameworks and ways of seeing the world. Because once you kind of have that as the lens you see things through, doesn't matter what NFT collection or what thing you engage with, you're looking at it through an understand, like you say, and an understanding it that will help you make an informed decision about what you invest or not invest into. And that notion of the rights of the individual versus the collective, like that's a big one. Like, we aren't taught that in like civics in school anymore about what's right wing, what's left wing, what's conservatism and what's socialism, what's the rights of the individual and what's the rights of the collective and so forth. Like I've had to, that's one of been my greatest learnings in this crypto space, is, sometimes the best investment you can make is not into the crypto, but just into yourself. Like, because when you put money into the market, whatever you believe in, that's great, but you are now at the mercy of the market. Like there's nothing you can do. Once you put it into Bitcoin, you're at the mercy of what everybody thinks about Bitcoin. You can't change that. Yet when you take that same investment amount of money and you say, okay, I'm going to invest it in this course into myself, or I'm going to invest into this retreat, I'm going to have a break, or whatever you choose to do, you are in full control of what happens. And so this notion of putting it into the collective and being at the mercy of the collective, and this idea of putting it into yourself as an individual and now having full control over what you actually do and hustle with it, that's quite an important thing. And I think like that's something I really want to iterate with a lot of the young ones who are kind of watching a lot of kind of what's happening in this crypto space. I absolutely encourage it, kind of get into it and just get used to it and so forth. But you do sense the speculative aspect and the FOMO making money type of thing and putting it in, and some quite often with money they can't afford to lose, but you're putting it in there and you're at the mercy of what everybody does. Like if or if it's a rug pull or if everybody hodls, whatever, the outcome is going to be the collective that decide that.
It's not just determined by you.
If you put it in yourself and you educate yourself on something or you do something that makes you grow, like you're going to step back into that space better than you were before, or more informed, so maybe it's not buying crypto or NFTs, but maybe you want to consider doing an NFT course, or maybe you want to consider something that improve, self-improvement for yourself. And so that's one thing I've had to learn on my journeys in the space, is kind of knowing the return on investment is, it can be literal, but there's also a subjective notion to it, that it's not just measured in terms of a bear market or bull market, but how you are like investing in yourself so that you are a better person the next time you step into a bear market.
Learning how to read charts or learning how to and code, like I think of some of our taitamariki, some of our young ones now that are already building worlds in Minecraft and stuff. Like when it comes to it, like they'll be able to build out worlds in that metaverse, and if they learn how to code, and those possibilities are endless, but it's also, like you said, both focusing on our own mental health, on our own physical health, not staying. I spend too many hours glued to my computer, straight up, too many. And it's when I go out, like yesterday, went out to the Moana, had a swim, had a pure, and just felt like, wow, this is amazing. I need to do this more often. Or, going for a dive, going for a hunt, those sorts of things, like in the real world, connecting with our taio, because those frequencies that you're talking about, man, we get those frequencies from the sun. We get those frequencies from the waves, from the wind, from the ngahere, like all of those sorts of things, It's so important.
Absolutely. Like it's super critical. Like, the law of energy, like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The amount of energy and time and resource we're spending in this digital space, it's dangerous if we're not counterbalancing that with self-care in the analog, non-digital space. So, I know that when I got into the space in 2020, it became consuming. Like, I was spending all the time in the YouTube channels or like the Discords and trying to research different influences, and you just go down the rabbit hole, and then it becomes like, is it Solana? Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it and then before you know it, you're spending so much time on that and not necessarily on, well, the important things like family and that require the most attention, but also the other, like, like I was using crypto and stuff as a strand for the art, and now I'm spending more time researching the strands than actually making the art. And
Yeah.
so I think it's like that's where I am now personally on this journey, is like I've done my due diligence on all the space to know enough about how it works and operates, so that I feel comfortable as I'm scaling in this space and as I progress, that I'm able to, if I need to hire somebody or hire some developers, I know exactly what it is. I know why Cardano may not be as good as Algorand, or why Solana, its a centralization problem might not be ideal for this specific NFT, but I really like the ecosystem of Terra and Luna to mint NFTs. And I just want to get enough of an understanding of the ecosystem, so that when I do delegate and trust others to specialize in that, I can just go back to being the tutu and keep making, finding the stories and making, the creative process. I really enjoy that aspect. But there was a point there where I was spending way too much time in Discords and on Twitter, crypto Twitter, and all those things, and they're critical parts of it. But we have to be mindful of the balance of, of this space, depending on what it is. If your thing is to just be a speculator and you're just in it to flip and so forth, and you're not like us from the creative arts, all power to you. Go, like, do your deep dive and spend all those hours. But I know for myself and my journey, like I'm like, okay, I think I've got a general sense of how this all works, and I think I know which blockchain I want to commit to, and I will now delegate this person to be able to work on that, so I can just get back to figuring out the next thing, so that once they plug in, this next block is ready to move into, and so forth. So I definitely encourage everybody out there to maintain a balance, because we're moving into a digital asset space that needs to be counteracted by an analog, as you say, analog balance. And you're
Yeah.
right, nature is I was telling my wife this, nature has this beautiful way of making us feel like everything and nothing at the same time,
Yeah.
and by having that, I guess, analog reminder of being out in nature, where you feel like you are everything, but also you feel like nothing, you are just a grain of sand in this wider thing. Having that reset and then plugging back into the possibilities of the metaverse and all the insane things that come with that space is going to be quite an important thing for all of us to maintain.
Yeah, mean, bro. So if there was, because we've gone all over the place. We've gone into the whakapapa of your work. We've gone into how things, interact with the NFT, with the blockchain world. We've talked about culture in the metaverse on the blockchain, and that's a really big thing, and that's something that I think would be a good conversation, good wānanga for all of us to have.
Yeah.
All of us who are stepping into this space. If there was like one thing that you would want our kai whakarongo, our whānau who are watching and listening, if there was like one thing that you would want them to like really walk away from this conversation with, what would it be?
The As somebody who's watched many shifts in this technological space, watching cassettes turn into CDs, turn into Logic, turn into Final Cut, turn into block. I've always been somebody who's kind of, my mind kind of puts things together and sees where this is going to lead, and what's happening and what's about to happen is going to be the most amazing thing for all of us. Instead of us being at the mercy of centralized systems, blockchain means that you can customize a system around you. Like, you don't have to succumb to the way those guys do royalties, or the way that industry views publishing, and be at the mercy of those things. Like, you can be whoever you are, and you can customize a whole ecosystem around who you are, what you value, what you love, and make a living doing it. Like, one of the things I'm just fascinated by, like, I behind the scenes, behind the scenes, there's some drama going down in our local music industry. I'm
Yeah.
not going to draw drama towards this, but those in the know that some of the biggest artists, the artists that you guys out there know as some of our top artists from the Moana and the Pacific, are looking at their royalties and they're like, who's that? Who's that name? Like, and these have people that turn the blind eye to a lot of systemic things that have taken advantage of a lot of our communities. Like back when, during the tech boom era of the internet, when it was first being generated, they were telling everybody this internet thing is the mainstream media. Don't believe this internet hype. This Google thing, this Apple thing, these tech companies aren't real.
It'll be gone next week.
Yeah, the internet is fake. And while they're saying that publicly behind closed doors, they're like buying up all the stocks. And these are just systems, the banking system. We all know that all these systems of government, media, entertainment industry, they've all been designed to benefit a select few. The blockchain, NFTs, crypto, all the space is the flipping of that, and it's the decentralizing of all that centralized power. For example, what I was talking about before about how the current system that affords royalties to a lot of our artists, that's being flipped on its head at the moment. So considering, for example, because I get asked a lot about this, we can completely cut out the middlemen, the record labels and the streaming. Let's say somebody says, Matt, we want you to do a track with, oh gosh, who's the name? Let's just say, I saw somebody say in there earlier, my Aotearoa movement, brother, the movement. So let's say the audience base who dig our music, they say, Anonymous, we want another track with you in the movement, and we want to do it around the cops carrying guns in South Auckland. Let's say that's what the audience wants to see from us as a piece of art. So what's possible now through blockchain and smart contracts and allocating equity to the audience is, well, okay, cool. Let us just crunch the numbers. And I'll just keep the numbers simple just so it's easier to calculate. Yep. So we could go, okay, let's say we record the track and shoot the video, whatever. Let's say it's $10,000. And so we go back to the audience and we're like, cool, that thing that you're wanting to commission us to make is going to cost $10,000. Let's tokenize it. Let's decide, let's get 1,000 people to put 1,000 fans from Aotearoa that dig the movement Anonymous. They saw us get on Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's Hobbs and Shaw soundtrack and they want more of it. So we say, cool, let's make 1,000 tokens on this project. 1,000 people, all $10 each. And we decide, okay, let's do this thing. And we're going to allocate part of the royalties back to the audience. Let's say we allocate 37% back to the audience. So now we go off. We use the money that they've raised, the seed funding. It's not venture capitalists. It's not the banks. It's the community that love our stuff. It's the people. We go off, we make the content. And now we've got this crazy situation where we've made the stuff that they're wanting to hear in the first place, the commissioning of it. Yeah. And then once we put it out, they're happy because they've got what they're after from us. But now they are incentivized to bump it.
Yeah. Because they're shareholders as
they're
such.
Shareholders. And so by them bumping it and playing it and spreading it and getting more people, the kaupapa of cops carrying guns and stuff, that gets dealt with. The art is tending to those areas of society. But also because it's streaming and it's going through all the platforms that generate publishing and licensing and so forth, we are getting money back as the artists that wrote it all, but we've also allocated equity back to the audience. So the more they bump it, the more the return they're getting on their initial $10 in perpetuity. Or, we can write it into the contract, up until a certain point. I mean, who knows? And that's just one theoretical application. Well, it's not even theory. You can already see artists like Nas
you can do it. And so that makes them a shareholder in the kaupapa, in that song, in that album or whatever, but it also makes them the marketing team. Hey?
Absolutely. It's a win-win.
Those are usually roles that the record company would take.
And
but for those roles, they would take 60% of your profits and, whatever crazy number it was. Yep. Leaving the artist quite often, not getting as much as people think. People think, oh man, you've sold 100,000. Oh, bro, you must be balling.
If people knew how much money was in publishing and licensing in these industries, and like I say, I wake up every day and like just wonder if it's going to spill out into the media at some point. But at another, I'm like, it doesn't actually matter because your system's on the way out. Like these new systems
Yeah.
of how we can create these value based systems is absolutely going to be the default, because when we build them, God's greatest gift to us all is free will. People will look at the legacy system and they
Yeah.
will look at what we're doing and take your pick. Use your free
Yeah.
will to decide where you are going to allocate your time, your membership as a fan, your investments. And, it's such a beautiful thing. So I just really want to encourage everybody out there, whether you're an artist that's creating the stuff, whether you're a fan and the audience and you're consuming the stuff, it is a win, 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 win all around. And so
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, exciting time. But for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's the law of conservation of energy. It also means it's a very dangerous time because these legacy systems are not going to give it up without a fight.
Yeah.
And we can see that. We can see that in the
Watch the
battle
horse roll and
everything that's happening around media, around vaccines, and around mandates and lockdowns, and like we are seeing the battle taking place. But I just encourage everybody, whether you're the creator or whether you're the consumer, we are all going to benefit from this. Like all we have to do is just band together, stay power to the people, decentralize the systems. There will be certain elements of centralization that we need to have because of the nature of how, but we can hold them accountable. And it's a hugely exciting time, and we have to choose the up energy as much as there's the negative downside that's popping off. We can see it happening everywhere around us, this clash. We have to err on the side of the bull market. We have to hold our fundamentals and not be like I saw the recent thing about most people who have got into Bitcoin recently, 36% all sold at the bottom. So it's crazy. Conviction and fundamentals. If you're convinced in this technology, despite whatever happens, despite whatever the media says, despite whatever your mates say, if you do your due diligence in the space, I encourage you to hold on, because it is incredibly exciting what is happening.
Yeah, massive, bro. And it's like the possibilities are endless in that space. Like, how many projects or how many artists do you know that are kind of starting to think about rolling in that way, bro?
In the last week, I've seen like countless people just in the hip hop I'm seeing around that I've seen on my feeds and stuff. And I'm erratic on the feeds. I'm not on there constantly 24/7, but all of a sudden everybody's wanting to drop an NFT. Everybody's in on it. And I'm not one of these purists too, by the way. Like, I've also seen some people go, oh man, these people weren't there from the beginning. They don't know what it's like. They're just like, and then like I'm one of like I just believe in the technology, same way I just believe in the cassette tapes and Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro and haptic feed. I just like what the technology does because I know what benefits it can offer. So I just love seeing the scene develop. The more people in, the better. Like, I'm not, team this or team that or anti this or anti that. But I do, there's those elements of a bubble which can hurt a lot of our communities who don't have the fundamentals down of the space, like, not investing what you can't afford, invest what you can afford to lose and all these types of things. And so I've seen a huge explosion in interest in NFTs and all these types of things. I can see the FOMO happening, and we all know where a lot of that can kind of lead to and so forth. But overall, it's just great that the awareness is out. Like, that's the part I really enjoy is, a lot of us who have been in this, I got in at 2020, and I remember talking to a lot of these rappers and people about it then, and it wasn't a thing. And all of a sudden, everybody's in on it now. So it's like, I'm just like, oh, cool. Like the more people can get in, the more we can kind of make this thing be adopted more, because by more mainstream adoption of these technologies, the faster our societies can heal and get on to the next level of prosperity for all of us. I mean, I'm sure everybody out there knows what Shazam is. People don't realize that Shazam type technologies are talking to the publishing, licensing, royalty companies, talking to the speaker headphone companies, which means we are heading to a place where we completely cut out the operas and these other people who clip the ticket on our royalties, and that as soon as a pair of smart headphones in the future or speakers detect using the Shazam type technology that your track is playing through it, your crypto wallet immediately gets deposited your
Bruh.
royalties. Like, how dope is that? You
Bruh.
know, like
Yeah. And
most
if we're setting it up with the good values and and that way of thinking, then man, that's pretty
yeah,
special. It's pretty mind blowing.
the labels don't dictate what is good or not. Anybody who chooses to say, I'm going to give this track the time of day, I want to listen to it because I like it, them listening to it means you get paid. It's not getting clipped. It's not getting going through the murky depths of the current licensing publishing industry that is quite self-serving. But that's just one thing. This is going to happen across
Yeah,
all
this is in
sectors:
music. This
real
is in music,
estate,
but also
banking, everything.
and also like visual arts, like if you think of artists that say Robin Kahukiwa, if she sold one of her pieces back in the day, when she was kind of on the come up, she would have got, whatever putia she got at that time, and that was the koha to her. And then someone else sells it on, sells it on, sells it on. Now they sell it today, and it's worth like, huge amount of money. That person who's selling it, they're getting the huge amount of money, but the artist who created it in the first place, the artist who imbued it with her modi, with her thinking, with her creativity, with her skills and talents, she's not getting anything from that, sale down the road. And I think that's another difference for artists, for photographers, painters, whatever, with these NFTs, is that, in perpetuity, that artist or that artist's whānau can be receiving those, that it's an exchange of energy, it can come back to them and benefit them, as well as the people who are selling it on, as well as the people who went, "Ooh, I like this artist," and I think in time, they'll be up there or whatever.
Yeah,
I think, man, and that's, again, we've just talked about two different kind of realms. We've talked about music, we've talked about art, but how many other ways can we use this sort of technology? I know one of my mates, Kay Marie, she's talking about using blockchain technology to hold and document whakapapa.
yeah,
So that uri can go back and connect with their ancestors and stuff like that, or have it as a decentralized way of holding that knowledge, so you can keep it safe. Access is limited to maybe people who come from that whakapapa,
yep,
but it's also there. If someone's house burns down, they don't burn down that whakapapa book, or
beautiful.
if someone passes away, then that person that had that knowledge in their head, that knowledge isn't gone with them. So I think, it's like any technology, has the ability to do bad, but also has the ability to do beautiful things. And I think it's down to the values that we have and the way that we kind of approach things.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you're right. As people of the Moana and the Pacific, and it's all genealogy. It's all about, in Samoan we call it ngafa. It's like this is the family lineage, and then the titles got split here, and then it went there, and this is where so much trouble and drama is within our Samoan diaspora. Is it's like, oh no, your Matai chief title isn't legit because you didn't go through, you didn't get gifted it through this person, and then it becomes debatable, and then they go back to the courts to kind of try to settle it at the land and titles level, only to find out that those paper records were stopped, being collected in the 80s, and so now we have no provenance. We've got no record of what actually is or was. And so, the ability of blockchain and smart contracting to be able to move into the space of our cultural preservation of family names, of ngafa, of genealogy, and so forth, it protects all these things that are just inherently us, like our family bloodlines and the way we distribute. We are here in the diaspora, but we're always wondering what's happening to our family plot of land back in Samoa. Every Samoan diaspora person thinks this. Like, we go back on these visits, and all of a sudden it's like, who's that family on our land? And then we get into these arguments, and hey, that gate line, where you put your fence post is now like 2 meters over here. And they're like, no, it wasn't.
What happened, bro?
Yeah. And so, you know, there's just so many ways for this technology to support our cultural preservation of our, the things that make us inherently us as a people and so forth. So it's so exciting. It doesn't matter whether you're the younger generation looking at it from the artistic standpoint, or whether you're looking at it from our parents' generation and looking at it in your old years, you're wondering, our oldies are sitting there watching all this COVID stuff playing out, and they're like,
Yeah.
what's the future hold? We came here on a mission to kind of get our families up in level and get our kids educated so that we could protect back home for us in the diaspora. And I know that they're watching all of these unfolding events around the world with a bit of a worry. And so, like, for example, I talk to my parents all the time about blockchain, and I try to
Yep.
normalize it with them. And
Yep.
that's something I encourage a lot of our other creatives and audience members to do too, is to talk to our elders about it. This should not exclusively be our digital generation literate thing, but we need to kind of articulate it to them as best as we can about what the possibilities are, because while they are alive as the analog last link to the way life was, then we can take them while we're still blessed to have them, and take that and encode that as the first blocks in the blockchain. Because once we lose them, then we're at the mercy of academia and what was written in the books, or whoever got the most funding from Creative New Zealand or New Zealand funding to make content about what it is and so forth, and all these legacy systems that will now dictate what the fundamentals are. Those legacy systems should not dictate what are the first blocks in the blockchain. Our parents, our papas, our nanas, our analog links to the islands should be the first block in these blockchains. It's a fresh start for all of this. And so there's all these elements to it, but there's a responsibility that I just wanted to impress upon everybody about the necessity to take a lot of the fundamentals of what blockchain and Web 3.0 is, and immediately deploy our cultural capital that exists within our analog papas and nanas and our communities and the churches and all these, the current existing analog world, and preserve them within the first blocks of the blockchain moving forward as early adopters.
Massive, bro. Another mic drop.
Yo.
But that is something, eh? So that's the stage that we are in. We're at the stage where the internet got invented, where cell phones first got invented, and only a few people have them, sort of thing. We're in the space where this stuff is quite complex. It's quite hard to understand, and it's quite hard to engage with. But like the first time when the first big brick cell phones came out, everyone was like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, that's cool." But now, 5-year-olds know how to work an iPhone. Like, it's going to be at that stage where we're all going to be able to interface with the blockchain easily, effortlessly, and it's not going to be difficult. But it's like, I really love your kōrero about the importance of laying down that foundation now, and laying it down with our pakeke, with our kaumātua, with our kuia, so that stuff doesn't just get lost in that was history.
Yeah.
That was how they used to be. Nah, bro, like they're tikanga for a reason, These tikanga have been passed down for a reason, because they work, because they keep us safe, because they facilitate our connection with each other and with our taiao. So, like, those are massive things. So,
and that's why I love what you do. Like, you have this really fascinating knowledge of, like, the art form that you do and so forth, but the way you constantly weave your te reo into it, and you just normalize it, like it's just part of, like, you are what you repeatedly do, and what you are, the world is just a vision board. You are what you see. The environment around you is what will, program you. And with yourself, like, constantly throwing the te reo in there, and throwing the indigenous perspectives in there, it normalizes for everybody that engages with it and it becomes, eventually through osmosis, they start doing it and so forth. So in this crypto space, in this NFT space, the more of us that can keep talking about it from this perspective, it makes it a more normal thing for the young ones coming through. Because if we don't, then it becomes exclusively a crypto punk conversation. It's exclusively a Bored Apes conversation, and those are great too. Like, those are communities and areas of application as well that have existed for 30 years, 40 years. But our kaupapa, our ngafa, goes back centuries, and it always gets passed down from generation to generation. You are the kaitiaki. You're responsible for this. Please pass it on. And so now that we are in 2022 being gifted this technology, our ancestors are tapping on the shoulder. You better make sure that you don't, that
pass
you
on the message, babe.
pass this on, make sure we transition through this portal well.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's a lot of where a lot of my focus and a lot of my time and energy. Like, I used to be up in the different spaces, like getting into the technicals, but I realized, okay, that's quite surface level thing about deciding which blockchain and blah 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 blah. But what is the bigger picture? Like, why you're still breathing and you have the opportunity to serve? What is your responsibility with the blockchain and the way you produce? Like, yeah, cool, you made stuff for Hollywood, you made stuff for the music industry and all these other things, but where are you really trying to create the true value and responsibility of what you've been gifted with? And so, yeah, that's absolutely the space that we align on. And hearing dudes like yourself that look at the space from this perspective. There's many perspectives. Like, a lot of people get into the NFT space for, they're interested in that aspect of it and all these types of things. But I gravitate towards this type of kōrero that reminds us about the responsibilities that we have as early adopters.
And the opportunity that we have, eh? It's an opportunity to, we could either do it or we could not. But we have this opportunity to be able to infuse our culture, our tikanga, our whakapapa into the space where our kids are going to be, whether you like it or not. Our kids are going to be in that space. Our mokopuna are going to be born into that space where that's just normal. That's the world they know. And so if we don't take this opportunity and, infuse it with our cultural values, our tikanga, our mātauranga, then, what are they going to be growing up in?
And just like crypto teaches us, like, you analyze crypto through two lenses. You look at it through the fundamentals and the technicals. Our kids are going to be really good at the technicals because they understand like the technology and what you press that there and it does this and this. But the fundamentals is the part that they're going to have a little bit of a problem with, because our indigenous practices and why we do it and why in this culture they've done this thing for hundreds of years. Like, we need to be kind of imprinting that within our kids as a fundamental, like, that's your template, that's the roadmap you operate from. It doesn't matter what blockchain gets put in front of you, it doesn't matter what the tokenomics are, it doesn't matter how many in the collection that you encounter, but these core values from an indigenous perspective, or oile Samoa, or oile Konga, oile, like whatever your heritage is, whatever your inherited ancestral journey has been, that becomes the lens, the glasses that you put on first. So it doesn't matter where you navigate within the metaverse. It might be very, very liberal, very, very conservative, or very, very dinosaurish, or very, very whatever. But your lens is your cultural lens that your grandma wanted you to have, that her grandma, that's been passed on through to kind of be your guiding star. Those, the same way we look to our, to the stars to help us navigate through that next space. The metaverse is the same type of thing. It's exciting to be able to do anything, because that's what the metaverse is, the ability to do anything. That's dangerous if you don't have an anchor and if you don't have some sense of stabilization. And that stabilization comes from our family, comes from our ainga, comes from our whakapapa, and so forth. So we need, a very strong movement to make sure that, as we progress further into the space, that those frameworks are being passed on to our kids. So regardless of whatever the crypto NFT platform is, or whatever the metaverse thing is, that they will be safe. I mean, here's one last thing just to conclude the space. When you know how the brain works, and it's neurons firing electrical pathways, what one of the founders of Google is doing, and brain scientists have been doing this a lot, and I follow a lot of the work of Joe Dispenza and other scientists in the space, is they're able to measure and regenerate memories from a person's brain. And without going too far down the rabbit hole, what scientists are looking at now is the ability to be able to take a person's brain, or Elon Musk Neuralink kind of tap into it, and be able to generate a digital avatar of your personality, of who you are. Because when you're angry, when we get angry, we have a certain chemical that releases into the brain, which creates an electrical signal. If it's an electrical signal, we can measure it. It's binary. We know how to track it. We can recreate those things. And so scientists are able to take our human experience that we perceive it within our brains and document that data. And from that data, they can generate an avatar. And we are now at this, like people can do, like, go down the rabbit hole on this, but where we're essentially heading is, a world where on your deathbed, or before that, where you will be given the option before you pass into the next, beyond the veil. Do you want to generate a digital avatar of yourself and fuse with AI so you keep living? Do you want to be around with your mortal?
Wow.
So like, it preserves your personality and all those things that the brain holds and measures and stores, because your brain is just a computer, and it fuses it with AI. And so what are the philosophical repercussions of being able
Yeah, bro.
to live forever? And the guy that's doing this, who's from Google, like that was one of his dreams, was to bring his father back. And
Yeah.
as people of the Moana, as indigenous people, like, how do we answer that fundamental question
Yeah. And
about,
where's Wairua in that?
yeah,
Where's Modi in that? But yeah, man, like and again, with any technology, it's technology, and it's neutral. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. This could be an absolutely beautiful thing. That we could be able to engage, or our mokopuna would be able to engage with us as their tupuna in that way, or it could be bloody freaky as.
exactly. And it's going to
Like,
go down
I don't
whichever
know
way
how I
we
feel
make
about
it.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's something that we have to wānanga, eh?
Like I say, the art follows the technology of the time, and this is not theoretical. This is what's on record. Like Elon's looking into this. The teams over at Google are looking into this. Like, as and we are the people they're making products for. So as a community, what's our if this what are our rules of engagement as a
Yeah.
people's, like, how do we head into the space where we love grandma and we're going to miss her? So do we keep her around? Should we generate another avatar and keep talking to her after the fact, although we're talking to her coding, but AI? Like, it's
And how does grandma feel about that?
exactly.
Hey.
And that's such a subjective, crazy question. And if we don't start to, like our ancestors and our forefathers, like, if we don't, as early adopters now, start looking into this type of thing, then if we don't, then we are at the mercy of the world's algorithm, or whoever's the richest person that can code whatever
Yeah.
they think it should be. And that's dangerous. And so, there's a lot of philosophical questions around this. And that's why I'll kind of come back to this notion of resample TATAU as an example of how we should operate in this NFT crypto space.
Yeah.
My thesis now with TATAU is our ancestors designed TATAU and Tāmoko as a process to train us to thrive and prosper throughout life, to survive life. What I mean by that is, like when you undergo the TATAU, you are taught through the process to embrace the pain, and it's painful. But once you're on the mat, you can't do anything about it. You just have to lie there and localize the pain. And the more it hurts, the more you lean into it. And you go through each session, and it's excruciating. But at some point, you complete that session, and then you go home and you recuperate, and you come back for more. And it's a difficult journey, and it goes over and over and over and over and over again. The tapping never ever stops. But then at some point in the process, it concludes, and then your body heals and grows, and now you've got a new identity. Now that's a metaphor for life. It doesn't matter, if you were a caveman back in the day. I use this example. You might have woken up one morning and you don't want to go hunting, but your whole family is reliant on you to sustain them. And so, having gone through the TATAU, you realize, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. You might have been the Mole movement in the 1900s, and the Germans were like, if you sell out your culture and change the system, we're going to give you all these economic benefits. And, TATAU would have taught them back then, this is a painful conversation to have, but we need to lean into the pain and do what's right. We will not sell out. We will continue this movement. You can banish us to Saipan if you want, but we will not sell out. As painful as that is, TATAU's taught us that we have to just enjoy the pain. and so forth. And that's something that I've had to learn in my own life is, the tatau the metaphor of tatau. There's so many things about myself that I pretend I don't want to acknowledge, but the things that I can benefit from if I acknowledge the selfishness I often have as an artist, or the ego, or the not maintaining a balance with family, or all these things that I hold at the back of my mind and I don't want to deal with it. I need to take those things and put it on the mat and to tell it, and because
Wow.
by leaning into that pain, I will grow and become a better person and a better creative and so forth. And so that's what tatau has been, as a practice, as my thesis has been broadcast out into time and space, so that it doesn't matter where you come along in the timeline, it gives you a reference for being able to survive life, because life is hard. So that's just a tell. What are the other practices that need to be, from our indigenous perspective, that need to be transmitted throughout time and space, and now metaverse? So these are the conversations that keep me up and keep me quite fascinated about the space, because I know it's important things that, in the same way we are benefits of what the Mau movement did back in the 1900s. Like, our existence will be different. Like, if they didn't make those decisions in the 1900s, and the way they made decisions in the 1900s would have been different if they didn't have tatau that taught them that you have to lean into the pain, not just physically once off when you get your tatau, but every day you get tataued. Every day there are things that happen throughout the day that you don't want to deal with. But tatau teaches us you have to lie there and just take it and accept it and just push on through the pain barrier. So in the same way, tatau as an indigenous first chain in that analog blockchain has been transmitted forward into the future and the metaverse. What else is it in NFTs and crypto and all of this space as early adopters do we need to do to preserve this and transmit it into time and space, so that we do justice to our ancestors on our shoulders?
Very beautiful. Beautiful. Mihi kauna ki a koe moe nei whakaaro, moe nei whakapapa, moe nei mātauranga, ko tau mai ki a koe, ana ko tukuna mai kia tātou, hei wānanga mā tātou. Just, really want to mihi to you, bro, for making the time, but also for bringing all of that whakapapa, all that mātauranga, all that knowledge, that's come down through your lines, through your tupuna, all the way to Aotearoa, and kind of, reaching back as well. So you're 1 foot here, you're 1 foot there, and you're also looking into the future. So really want to mihi to you, bro. Helping us navigate the space, not only in a technology way, not only in the NFT, blockchain, metaverse way, but also, really presencing and getting us to think about, okay, so how do we do this in a cultural way? In a way that, retains our ahurea, our culture, our cultural values and our tikanga. Bro, I think it's like such an important part of this journey, bro. So really want to mihi to you and to all of our kai whakarongo, kai mā takitaki, to everyone that's joined us, that's commented, that's, sent your whakaro and sent your, your emotions, how you feel about the space. Really want to mihi to you guys, and to all the people that'll listen. A tōna wā, mihi kawana, bro. Cheers.
Sure. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for having me, and much love to everybody.
And all the best for the next part of the journey, bro. If I can, bro, I will be there when it's for the Festival of Arts, bro. I'd love to be there and love to see that.
Oh, absolutely. I'll absolutely dial you in. There's certain, like, I've been in the heavy lifting of the initial stages, and as we progress to the later stages in which we will dial in the strands of NFTs and stuff, you're the first person on the list that I'm going to tap into, into Kaupapa, like, damn native, Kaupapa driven rhymes. These are Kaupapa driven blocks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man.
That's us, bro.
Yo.
Okay,
Peace.
tēnā tātou, pō Mārie, cheers.